Hey folks, welcome to Tully River Quail. Excuse me. I'm going to show you a couple of tricks that I use to make leak-proof drinker tubes and show you some of the reasons why these little nipples fail. First we'll start with the drinker tubes. What I'm trying to do is make 4-inch spacing between my drinker tubes, or my drinker nipples, sorry. So what I do is there's a 1/2 inch inside of the coupling if they're seated all the way, and I'll show you the trick to how to do that. But I will mark my pipe for 3 inches, which I've done. And these pipe cutters are awesome. And then I just cut the 3 inches. There you have it. And then I use this stuff called Lube Tube. I have it from my hot tub, but it's good for joining pipes. It's a sealant, clear jelly kind of stuff, and it also helps putting parts together, so it helps it slide. So what I do is just put a little here on the edges, and I'm going to fit it in here. Give it a little pound, and there you have it. There's my 4-inch space. I'll do this other one here. Make sure I line it up. Give it a little tap. And then that's fully seated. So you see that measures right at 4 on center. See, 4, upside down 4. All right, so once you build the drinker tube the length, then you have to connect it either to another drinker tube. So there's various fittings. You can get at the home store that just go on the end. But by using this lube tube, it helps it seat, plus it helps it seal without having to use the PVC glue. That won't come apart unless you force it, not under the low pressure. Even with a winter watering system that's only 2 gallons per minute, that's not going to separate, that's not going to leak. Okay, now let me talk about drinker tubes, or drinker nipples. Here's 2 that failed that I've taken out from a little coop that I'd bought. This one failed because the lady wrapped the Teflon tape around the O-ring, so it prevents it from fully seating. This one failed because the O-ring is misshapen. And let me just show you a comparison. I hope you can see this. Look at the difference in size from this one over here is bigger. This one over here is smaller. I don't know if you can see that, but take my word for it. Another thing that fails with these is sometimes, since they're made out of the country, you'll find that this is really loose. And if you look inside, you can see the spring. So what you have to do is use like an Explorer or some kind of little metal pick not to damage the O-ring. But if you take that off, this pin comes out, and there's a spiral spring in there that's wider on one side and narrow on the other. Well, the wide side has to go against the base, all right? Sometimes they put them in upside down. They're making thousands of these every hour, right? So if it's too loose and it's leaking, then it's probably because the spring was installed backwards, okay? This one is properly wrapped, but the O-ring's bad. So I could replace that O-ring if I wanted to. I keep them wrapped so I know that they've failed for me. All right, let me show you another trick that I do. Instead of using Teflon tape, I use this stuff called Megalock, and I use this for all my home plumbing. All right, and this is basically a liquid or a paste Teflon tape. And I just squirt a little bit on there. Just a little bit. And usually I'll use a little Q-tip. But you want to stay away from the O-ring. Now this stays, see, I got a little there because I'm filming this. But I'll clean that off. Anyway, this will stay soft and be able to be removed, but just that little bit on there seals the threads. All right, and you can wipe that off with a paper towel, clean it. Another thing this Lube Tube is good for is to put around the O-ring just a little baby bit and help seal that. Now, when you're looking at putting in a nipple, you want to make sure that the base of the unit right here, just take your fingernail, make sure there's no burrs or edges all the way around it, and also evaluate your O-ring. Make sure there's no casting errors, little rips or anything from, because these are just pressed in an injection mold. So sometimes you'll see a little fin or a flare that you have to take a little scalpel or something and clean off the plastic, make sure it's flush. Here's another little drinker tube. It doesn't have that. The mechanism for the shutoff is inside here. You just remove this cup and it gives you access to that. The cup just comes on and off with a little flippy thing. All right, so once you build your tubes, you have to either connect them together. You can put something like that on there. You can put a threaded end on if you want to thread something. So what I usually do is I'll hook this up to a garden hose unless I'm connecting multiple drinker tubes. When I connect multiple drinker tubes, I'll either use this 1/2-inch clear tubing or this reinforced tubing. This is twice as expensive. You can get 20 foot for this, 10 foot for the same price. But if you want it to last, whatever, it's a little bit more resilient, it's thicker material for this mesh lined one than this clear one. But the other thing is, if you're going to be moving your trays around, this is a little bit more flexible. So consider what you're going to use. These are all both 1/2-inch. So usually what I'll do is, if I'm going to have a long run, I'll connect it to a garden hose and have a sacrificial garden hose. So this is a 1/2-inch inner diameter. So that will go right on there with a clamp. And then I'll use a garden hose, which is, mine's 5/8. Sometimes they're 3/4, but I have a 5/8 one that I'm using right now. And that'll go onto here. When I'm clamping garden hoses, I'll use these screw type band clamps. When I'm using plastic hoses, poly hoses, I'll use these little clamps, finger spring clamps. And I use 16mm size. These are 14, they sent me the wrong ones. But 16mm gives you enough tension and is big enough to go around even this braided line. And again, you can connect anything. Here's different. This is an elbow. The pipe diameter is 5/8, so that'll hook up a plastic garden hose and it'll get screwed into a fitting. All right. Let me just show you one other last thing. These are the drinker tubes I make. And this one's already insulated and everything. But basically, it's just a 1-inch thick flexible PVC, and you can screw the drinker nozzles right into the plastic if you drill them out with a step drill, and that embeds them into this 1-inch chamber and allows this to stay a little bit warmer in the wintertime when you're circulating heated water. And this is just a PVC tube, flexible PVC. Here's one that I haven't wrapped. But you can see this is just a 1-inch bung or bushing, and I have a 1/2 inch, but this comes in different sizes. So if I'm going to a garden hose, there's more fittings to go to a 5/8 inch plumbing using a 3/8 or 3/4 inch threaded bushing. So if I'm going to a garden hose, I used a 3/8 bushing, or I'm sorry, the 3/4 inch bushing, and that just slides in. If I'm going to go to 1/2 inch tubing, I'll use this 1/2 inch threaded. All right, one last thing, insulation. If you're using outdoor insulation, it's going to be exposed to water. Take the extra effort and use the neoprene kind instead of just the foam. It's about 3 times more expensive right now with Biden inflation, but this won't collect water, and you're not going to have any problems with many problems you'll have if you put just the foam stuff out there. Sometimes with junctions or with convoluted plumbing, or with even electrical cords or something that you want to insulate or keep dry, I find that this shipping material can be wrapped around valves, spigots, faucets, and it gives you the insulation, and it's a little bit more manageable because this is just a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch or 1 inch diameter. If you have a shutoff valve, wrapping it with this, with a little piece of tape or a little spring and a band clamp, that allows you to remove it if you need to access it. All right, folks, one last thing. I said that already, didn't I? If you're going to go through like a wooden hutch, and this is going to be a permanent installation, then you can squirt some of this great stuff in there. It's just a foam insulation. You can even do that around valves. And the way I do that is I'll take a plastic bag and I'll cut a little hole so the valve fits through, and then I'll tape that off, and then I'll inject into the bag so that I can limit the space that this stuff expands to and keep it more circular as opposed to just a big glob of that stuff. All right, folks, I think that's all I have to say. Different fittings. Goes to a garden hose. I can take this threaded part out that goes to 5/8 inch and put a 1/2 inch. So if I wanted to connect this tubing to a garden hose, I can just swap that out with whatever size that I wanted. All right, folks, Tully River Quail, stay free. Over and out.